Welcome to Gallery Teachers Masterclass. My name is Chris Bartlett, and today we're going to be talking about role play in the classroom. Several months ago for Gallery Teachers, I wrote a blog entry called Confessions of a Baby Zoomer. Basically, in that blog post, I wrote this paragraph. I was sharing a lot of my insecurities about teaching online, and I wanted to really relate to fellow teachers about the challenge of the idea of your teaching style relapsing to something that you previously never wanted it to be. And I wrote this paragraph. At the beginning, I really did feel that my teaching style had relapsed. All of that fine teacher training just didn't seem to always configure so smoothly to the fiddly world of online teaching. And looking back, I was really frustrated by it. It was as if my progressive teaching style had done a Marty McFly and I had gone back to the time of Queen Victoria. So that was how I was feeling when I was teaching online. Basically, as you can tell by my choice of visual for this slide, it wasn't a million miles away from that. My teaching style whilst teaching online had ceased being very interactive. It felt like an administrative role checking grammar exercises, and it had gone back to what I call a style, which is jug and mug teaching, classic chalk and talk. So whilst in this stage of anxiety and insecurity about teaching and adjusting to the world of teaching online, I did some serious soul searching. I had a Yoda moment. When I did my PGCE, many moons from now, I was asked a very strange question. I was asked this one: are you a teacher of your subject, or are you a teacher of people? And I was also asked, do you teach like you were taught? And during this moment of soul searching about my teaching style, back in April last year, it really made me ask, what do I love about this job? Why am I good at it? And what is my problem with this very frontal style of teaching online? And maybe you went through similar stages of introspection yourself whilst teaching online. And the first question, being a teacher of your subject or a teacher of people, maybe some of you believe that the two are not exclusive from each other, which I certainly don't believe that they are. However, maybe some of you prefer more traditional, less interactive methods and prefer being what Jimmy Scrivener calls being an interventionist, where you go in, get your hands dirty, and you tell students what things are. So this is being a teacher of your subject. Whereas me, what I lost touch of, what I lost sight of last year, was how much I love being a teacher of people, how much I love mobilizing, how much I love and enjoy getting language learners to do exciting things. With all of these thoughts, all of these introspective Yoda thoughts as such, thinking about, do you teach how you were taught? Are you a teacher of your subject, or are you a teacher of people? And if so, what do you love about teaching? What do you love about mobilizing people? What do you love about what type of language teacher you are? What do you love about doing interactive activities? It arrived me at roleplay. So over the years, I've been teaching for over a decade and a half now, and I've always loved doing role play activities. So what we're going to look at today: what is a role play? How can students benefit from doing a role play activity? How can we create our own role plays from scratch? And how can I consolidate and practice grammar through role play? So, what is a role play? Role play is any speaking activity when you either put yourself into somebody else's shoes or when you stay in your own shoes but put yourself into an imaginary situation. Imaginary situations, functional language for a multitude of scenarios can be activated and practiced through role play. In addition to role play activities, many of you may have encountered what is called as a simulation task. Simulation tasks vary from role play. Gold stars if you've identified what the picture is of. It is, yes, from the film Apollo 13, and they are in the simulation tank. And yes, this is what a simulation task is. You're acting out a real life event, like checking into a hotel rather, for example. And how boring. Students do not act out a different personality. So they just do it just themselves doing, very interesting things. So having looked at a quick introduction, a definition to role play, and differentiated from a simulation task. Why role play? Why do them? Why don't we just get the grammar books out, and why don't we follow textbooks A to Z and just do that all the time? Yeah. So basically, not that all textbooks don't do this, of course they don't. But however, the beauty of a role play is that it taps into the fine and wonderful principles of task-based learning. Student-centered. Accuracy develops out of fluency. It's a fluency-first approach. Emergent language as well as functional language. So all of these emerge when you do a role play activity. And they're authentic, a relationship between a task and a real world activity or event. And also, one of my big favorite things about doing role play activities is that students drop their shyness and other personality and cultural inhibitions, which is a massive added value of why role play is important. Not everything is about grammar and structure all the time. And declarative versus procedural knowledge. Again, another classic movie reference, The Breakfast Club. Yes, declarative versus procedural knowledge. We have Brian, the brain, versus the criminal. Declarative knowledge. Many of my students in Italy, God bless their cotton socks. I love them, adore them, but many of my students sound more like language teachers than they do language learners. I'm sure they don't mind me for saying that. I actually joke with them in jest and say, start next week, because many of them can give word for word perfect definitions of various, aspects of grammar. Many than most start out language teachers. So, but we don't want that. We don't want that. We want procedural knowledge, don't we? So this is the beauty of role play, is that it taps into the notion of procedural knowledge, not showing what you know, not showing the theory behind it, but actually going out and using what you are taught. In the case, yes, as we can see. For my visuals here. Okay. So besides declarative and procedural knowledge, role plays, they are a refreshing departure from having to talk about yourself all the time. This is one of my biggest gripes about our wonderful and beautiful profession, that many materials do take liberties, that they do expect language learners to just talk about all aspects of themselves. What did I teach the other day? Was it English file, pre-intermediate, unit 4, unit 5 or something, about students' dreams? Dreams. Yes. When I think about my own experiences as a language learner, learning Hungarian, picking up Italian, I don't really want to talk about my dreams. Or in the context of now, if you haven't seen your family for nearly 2 years, do you really want to talk about them? Yeah, it can get really heavy. Some of our materials at times, and I think we have to be very sensitive towards that. Maybe you disagree. However, I often feel like this. Whereas the beauty of teaching a role play is we get students to be someone else. Which, how amazing is that? So, to basically extend on to what I was talking about there, typical pandemic answers to typical textbook questions. What are you doing at the weekend? Nothing special. Now, where are you going on holiday? I don't know. What can you tell me about your brother or sister? I don't like them. They are annoying. I've been trapped with them for weeks at a time. So, a huge attractive appeal to asking a student to be someone else is that we are teaching during a time in which, for I think all of us or many of us, it is sort of difficult being ourselves because so much of what we love to do, love to be, has been restricted. So it has been, I think, a service, not a service, and I feel duty bound to give students the opportunity to have a different experience from being themselves when being yourself in the current climate is not easy. But anyway, so touched upon definition of role play, simulation tasks, having a departure from shy, being shy, looking at it in the context of now. Now, if we think about different types of role play, there are many. Okay, so some of my favorites: opposites, chance meetings of contrasting people, for example, in a lift or on a date. Yes. So you can ask, so when you're thinking of different types of role play or encountering different types of role play materials, often you encounter this idea of opposites. Reenacting a scene from a film or a sitcom. Absolute goldmine and extremely motivating during a time in which everyone has been absolutely immersed in watching lots of films, lots of TV series. So reenacting a scene from a film or a sitcom. And in doing that as well, you require less in the way of students having to use their imagination. Because some students, if you give them, if it's not scaffolded enough, then students can feel overawed in having to come up from something from scratch. So giving students the chance to reenact a scene from a film or a role play, always a winner. Exploring a character. The added value of role play, and I love this in particular at summer schools, is that you really get students to explore the idea of empathy, which is something, I think we often forget, don't we, as teachers? It's all the focus, all the onus is on, developing output, developing, fluency. It's not always asking the question, how would you feel if that was you? Because that is such a potent tool in any classroom. Yes, other than exploring a character, responding to an emergency. You may have seen many casebook studies, especially in business textbooks, which give students the opportunity to respond to an emergency for a company, for example. A celebrity role play. Yes. At the moment, we are in the middle of the Euros, the European Championship. And celebrity role plays. You can get students to act out an interview with a celebrity, and in the context of a football match, a post-match interview. Presenting extreme points. Yes, now we're talking. So presenting an extreme point, exploring. Yeah, so basically a debating class in which you can involve devil's advocate, for example, where students present a point of view which they wouldn't necessarily do. A negotiation. So this is also a fabulous type of role play as well. Okay. So examples of different role play. So just to recap, opposites, reenacting a scene from a film or a sitcom, exploring a character, responding to an emergency, a celebrity role play, and presenting extreme points of view in a debate or a negotiation. Right. Next, how do we build our own role play from scratch? During that dark time in which I had resorted to being a teacher from the time of Queen Victoria, I really wanted to, I had that moment where I thought, you know what do I love about this job? You know, what do I need to do to respond to the situation? Because I saw so many, long, sad faces, especially with my younger learners, who by all accounts do believe that extremely depressing thought that they are the sum total of their grades, which they are absolutely not. With a role play, you give students the experience of showing the originality of their thoughts, their personalities, and you have to give them that opportunity. And the best way in which to build a role play from scratch to help enable those things to happen is to respond to what is in the news at the moment, what are the hot topics. And this is one I have done recently. If you do not know who these people are, then shame on you. Yes. Only kidding. This is the Eurovision Song Contest winners. Not only a victory for Italy, but a victory for rock and roll itself. Yes, absolutely. My students adore them, and quite rightly so, because they are absolutely awesome. And yeah, so this is a topic I chose earlier, but yes, and I chose it because they are a hot topic. They still are. I set up a debating class recently. I set up a interview where they had to pretend to be the members of Maneskin and members of the press. So this is what I mean by choosing a hot topic. So this was Vesuvio level of hotness here in Napoli. Look at who you have in the classroom. Match them with roles that will challenge them. Maybe some of you are thinking, Masterclass presenter. That was typecasting. Maybe students will feel sensitive if you associate them with, with a specific role. Absolutely not. You can actually, as I will show you shortly, having in mind who you want your students to be can be enormously flattering, motivating, and extremely engaging. And I chose Maneskin because they already had an awareness of it. And creating character cards, absolutely essential. As you all know, as teachers, for students, it's not a case of what you want me to do, why you want me to do it, but how to do it as well. A character card I found with character cards, they cut a lot of corners, by which I mean they save you a lot of time. if you create a character card, which I'm going to show you an example of in a moment, they enable you to monitor. They cut out a lot less of running from pillar to post, like you're in Pompeii, basically. Moving on to my next triangle here. Allow ample thinking time. You want each and every one of your students to claim ownership over the activity, and you want them to not have this sense of them being dropped in at the deep end. You want to avoid that at all costs. You want to avoid a sense of them feeling rushed. Ample thinking time, must. And delayed feedback. Yeah, you want it to flow. You want, yes, the beauty of delayed feedback, it's like refereeing a football match. You don't want to be that type of referee that's blowing their whistle all the time and preventing that flow of play. You want the whole thing to run as smoothly as possible, and you want to use that delayed feedback method in which you can give not just what they should have done, not just emergent language, but you write down what they have been doing well, catch them doing well. So this, I'm an enormous advocate for that with feedback. Recently, I did a royal family lesson. I did this because all of my students, they kept asking for a royal family lesson. And of course, yeah, I wanted to motivate them. I wanted to have them engaged in a royal family role play. And this is how I did that. Yeah, so I did a recap of the royal family members. We watched a very short video. Why does Britain still have a royal family? So I immersed them in the context of the royal family. Yep, so I had some comprehension check questions. And then we looked at this, the Harry and Meghan interview. Role play dreamboat, the Harry and Meghan interview. I played it. I gave them of course, I pre-taught language to engage them in the role play and in the interview to help them to follow it. Yeah, and I got them to think about how they were feeling. How do you think they were feeling? So I began to engage them, not just in a comprehension check activity and vocabulary, but got them to think about how Harry and Meghan are feeling. So I did true or false statements. So yeah, got them to further explore the situation. And then bang, the royal role play. We talked earlier about, you may decide to do it differently, but I chose to assign them a royal family member, and they loved it. And yes, after the Harry and Meghan interview, I got them to imagine, what will it be like the next time the royals have a family Zoom chat? What do you think the atmosphere would be like? So I handed this scenario over to them. Some students at this point feel happy to run with it. Others become stricken with fear and they have a mental block. They don't know, even though they've been given all of this context about the royal family, when presented with a role play and you tell them what activity you'd like them to do, what role you'd like them to perform, many students become stricken with fear. But fear not, because this is the importance of the role play cards, which I mentioned earlier. Prince Charles. So I put some short bullet point sentences to define the role that I wanted my student to perform as Prince Charles. Your son has gone on national television with his wife and has said very bad things about the royal family. Do you feel angry, disappointed, sad? All of them. Use reported speech to refer to what hurt you in the interview. Use second conditional to give advice. If I were you, I would. With providing grammar, with providing functional language, you enable your students to have a sense of, this is what my teacher is listening for. Yeah, they don't want me to, I'm not being assessed on my acting skills. I'm being, my teacher wants me to use these in this context. Here's the Queen. You are the Queen, but you are a grandmother too. Do you express regret, sadness, anger? All of them. Role play is not just about vocabulary. It's not just about grammar. Intonation is such a powerful aspect of role play. And this is where you assign all of that autonomy to the students. Do they talk about regret? Well, I know we are one of the most famous dysfunctional families in all of the globe. I'm sorry. You should not have done that. Yeah, so you can give them that agency, and you add the emotion. You give them the choice. And again, so this was the grammar I selected for them. Use reported speech to refer to the interview. Why not give strong demands using must, have to? Because you're the Queen. And wish or past perfect to express regret. Meghan, you don't want to be in the palace, or it was the Zoom chat, wasn't it? Yeah. You want to be in LA. Are you proud of the interview? Ashamed? Again, thinking about intonation. Or more determined than ever to tell them what you think of them. Use third conditional to give an explanation of your actions. If you hadn't have said what you said, then I wouldn't have done that interview. Harry, do you feel conflicted between your wife and your family? Or are you 100% thinking only about your new life and America? Use narrative tenses to explain how you made the decision with Meghan. Use future forms to communicate your future plans. Kate, do you really hate Meghan as much as the media claim, or do you actually really like her? Are you against what Harry and Meghan did? Are you secretly jealous? Use so plus adjective such a plus singular noun to be very nice or very, very horrible. Defend your in-laws with the third conditional. They wouldn't have said that if you hadn't. William, you're going to be a king one day. Is now your time to show the rest of the royal family how great a king you will be? Or are you just an angry big brother? Use the past modals you can't have, you must have to make strong speculation and deductions. You should have plus past participle to criticize. Okay. How many of your students throughout the years or the time you've been teaching have told you, I can't remember when to use all this grammar that the textbooks tell me? Though grammar and function are very, very much aligned through a role play. And through providing students with an experience, they won't forget it. They won't forget that third conditional can be connected to regret, can be connected to giving an explanation if the first time they've used it is as Prince William, Kate, Charles, Camilla Parker Bowles, whoever. If you provide an experience, then that is a big golden key to helping them remember it forever. Okay, so that was an example of a role play that I've used recently. And I hope having shared that with you, that you're getting a clear idea of how you can use role play to informally assess grammar. The grammar points that I chose for each of the characters, the last thing that was an arbitrary thing. Those were chosen because it was the end of a course, a B2 level program for teenagers who were preparing for their first certificate. And those grammar points were very much intentionally chosen. Even on the basis of informally assessing the grammar. Because, if you just drop students in at the deep end and just give conversation points, then I think giving a role play, providing a role play is so much more motivating and energizing, and then just asking generic questions about their life, using, bog standard questions, which traditionally tests, different structures. How many of us are sick and tired of asking the question, which do you prefer, living in the countryside or the city? Massive apologies if you love asking that question, but I don't want to ask it ever again. How can I use a role play to consolidate on recent covered material? So as I just mentioned, so this is exactly what you can do with a role play. When I mentioned right at the start, are you a teacher of your subject, or are you a teacher of people? Then what I'm trying to show through a role play is you can be both. You can be both. You can do exciting, dynamic, interactive activities and align it with producing grammatical structures. Mini goals. As I mentioned earlier, how many times have you heard a student say, I can't remember when I need to use the grammar? In choosing a role play topic, think about characters and their function in speaking. What precisely are they trying to do, and what structures are required to do that? My role play with the royal family involved five or six characters. That was the number I had. 6 characters that I had in the classroom. And it was important to give each of the characters a different function. What is your character trying to do, and how does that correlate with grammar? Marry grammar and function, and your role play is a big royal wedding of those two things. Are your characters trying to persuade, provide an explanation, develop an argument, accuse someone? What grammatical structures do each of the characters need to achieve that? So all the time, you're having this big royal family wedding between grammar and purpose. What are they doing? What grammar are they using to do that? A reflective tool. Get to know what your students find interesting in the news at the moment. Absolutely. In my case, Maneskin, Eurovision, royal family. Immerse students enough in the topic so that they forget their inhibitions. You want to have your students under a spell. If you begin a class by saying, good afternoon, everyone, today we're going to do a role play, then by and large, the response usually is, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do something I don't feel normally, comfortable with. Okay, let's keep it real. Lay down that trail of crumbs. Immerse them gradually in the topic. Use guided questioning techniques. Keep it as a surprise. Don't tell them from the offset that they're going to do a big, grand, majestic performance, impersonation of the royal family. A warm-up task, ones which focus on combating shyness. if I cast my mind back to times in my life when I've been a language learner, um, whew, I can remember acute moments of, anxiety, inhibition, worrying about my, classmates being better than I am, being more fluent, having, been a bit more proactive behind the scenes with learning the grammar. You're filled with all these inhibitions as a student. Um, and we have to, as language teachers, have a warm-up task which helps combat that, especially in the context of a drama-based activity. Um, for me, a language lesson is pretty much, from my experience as a student in high school and sixth form, not for me, a drama class and a language learning class are pretty much the same. And with a warm-up task, the classic generic, warm-up activity, it is usually just activating schemata, thinking of vocabulary, and, you know, a warm-up activity, should also allow students to feel emotionally, ready to perform. Over the years, I've been very fortunate enough to see drama-based activities and warm-ups as part of acting troupes. And I often utilize those in a classroom, especially if your activity, especially if you want them to pay attention to things like intonation. You're not going to achieve that by just getting students to write down every word they can think of connected to the royal family. You have to, for example, get them in the zone for production. I often ask students to read out loud. I usually leave books around the classroom. I get them to pick books up and just read out loud all at the same time. I get them to read out as if they'd just won first prize at a beauty pageant. I get them to read out as if they've just been stopped by the police in a car for speeding. I get them to read out as if it's Christmas Day and they're 5 years old. I get them to do that all at the same time. But in terms of a must-do task, what warm-up activity can you think of that will emotionally get your students in the zone where they're going to perform? And for crying out loud, make the role play inclusive. Don't fly with the strongest. Devise strategies in which all students can feel engaged. How many of us have done role play activities, drama-based activities over the years where students feel inhibited and they remain silent and they allow the stronger, more confident ones to do the activity for them? What I do is, from the very beginning, when my students are in my classroom, I make them feel 10 feet tall. That's what I do. I tell them how fantastic the homework was, what I liked about it. I told them that I had a chat with their mum, their dad the other week, and they're really, pleased with their progress. I drop, little things like that. Massive positivity bombs right from the offset. That may not be everyone's style, but if you have a student, teaching, it's all about people skills, isn't it? It is about making people feel good about learning. And you'd be surprised just by how inclusive a classroom environment can become if you harness and nurture that kind of atmosphere. What it achieves, if you make students feel great, have them doing a drama-based warm-up, they're motivated, they feel engaged. They create a welcome change from many other coursebook activities. Many of my students during lockdown, my class often came after 5, 6, 7 hours of teaching before them, and they were exhausted. Role plays are a most welcome change from many other coursebook tasks. My royal family task was one of the classes that they enjoyed the most throughout the whole year. And it brings students out of their comfort zone and builds confidence. My students, for example, Fabrizio, Martina, they go home, their parents ask, what did you do? What did you do today? I was Queen Elizabeth II, Mum. I was the future King of England. Role plays do build confidence. Self-made dynamic lessons can help teachers feel less demotivated. Oh my word. I've honestly reached parts of this year where I do not want to see a textbook ever again. I know in a masterclass, that's probably not something I should be saying too much, but if you set aside the time to do something like this, then you'll feel great. You'll feel great after you've done a role play activity, as opposed to just going through the motions. And yeah, I get it. I'm definitely singing from the same hymn sheet here in terms of, as teachers, we have lives. We don't always have the time to do these amazing interactive dynamic tasks. But once you design something like this, you'll have it forever. And with things like role play cards, you can reconfigure them to lower levels, higher levels. And so once you have it done, you'll have it forever. What is available? When I was first asked to do this, I was specifically asked to be tangible and not to reel off too much in the way of theory. I was delighted to hear that, because that's not usually how I roll at all. However, I have to give enormous credit in my own teacher development by Mr. Neil Anderson. No relation to Brett Anderson of Suede or Mr. Anderson from The Matrix, but my Delta tutor has written a fantastic book with Neil McCutcheon called Activities for Task-Based Learning. And finally, useful websites for ELT resources. Of course, we have the Gallery Teachers Workshop Continuous Professional Development Workshop Library. So this is where all of the workshops live, and you can access them all at your leisure. Why do you enjoy using roleplay activities so much? They're interactive, they're engaging, they bring students out of their comfort zones, which is a tremendously important aspect of any form of teaching. And in addition to that, they're motivating. They are a welcome change from more traditional learning activities. And as teachers, we want to see smiles on faces, and we want to have the classroom as an environment in which people thrive, do things that they necessarily wouldn't normally do. Role plays are fantastic because they bring students out of their comfort zone. They provide students with the opportunity to show their personalities, to show their creativity. And it's not a passive mode of learning. They're very much part of the show. They're the center of the lesson. And ultimately, role plays in the classroom, they provide an experience. How many of us wonder why phone apps will never replace language teaching entirely? Because they can't do things like role play. They can't give students the opportunity to be different people, to try different modes of grammar for exciting reading, for exciting reasons. Role play activities can. This is exactly what they do. They provide students with an exciting reason to use the language and an engaging purpose in which to do so. And this is why role plays are amazing.